Every week, so much happens in your own country that it's hard to keep track of the news at home, let alone what's going on around the world. So the Global Summary is our weekly rundown of the biggest news events from around the world. In the next 8 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the biggest news stories, but we'll be moving fast. So if you want to find out more about any of these, then there's article recommendations in the description. This week's biggest stories include Britain taking on China's Hong Kong changes, Kim Jong-un ignoring Biden's phone calls, and Myanmar's former government fighting back. Before we start though, make sure you've subscribed to the channel and have rung the bell to be notified every time we put out a new global video. A lot of you haven't made the jump yet, and hitting subscribe not only helps us out, but also makes sure that you don't miss a thing. Thank you so much for your support. For months, even years now, tensions have been rising between China and Hong Kong. Ever since Britain returned Hong Kong to China in 1997, there's been a difficult balance in place, with China seemingly wanting to reintegrate Hong Kong into the superpower yet further, and as a part of that, diminish Hong Kong's democracy. Even back in the 20th century, this difficulty was foreseen, with the 1948 Sino-British Declaration put in place to try and ensure that Hong Kong would continue to hold on to some of its independence and protect the city's democracy. China's recent actions have run counter to that agreement though, with them fundamentally reworking Hong Kong's electoral process, not only making the city less democratic, but making it virtually impossible for anyone to win in the city without first being sanctioned by Beijing. If you want to find out more about the new system and the changes that China has made, then check out our video discussing that, it's linked down below. Anyway, since China made those changes, Britain and other countries around the world have spoken out. Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab commented this weekend, saying that the UK considers Beijing to be in a state of ongoing non-compliance with the joint declaration, a demonstration of the growing gulf between Beijing's promises and its actions. Raab went on to remark that the UK will continue to stand up for the people of Hong Kong. China must act in accordance with its legal obligations and respect fundamental rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. The UK and US also seem to be considering sanctions in response to this, but many doubt that even drastic action like this will change China's path forward, concerned that this Chinese power grab could be a sign of the superpower's intent to play hardball going forward. As I said, there's a link to the video in the description if you want more information. Let's move north slightly to North Korea, another country with an increasingly difficult relationship with the West. During President Trump's term, it appeared that the US and North Korea were moving closer together, but under the surface, the reality was a little different. Trump was indeed the first US president to meet North Korea's leader, but that was less impressive than it seems. North Korea would have been happy to see their supreme leader pictured next to almost any president, because such a meeting grants legitimacy to UN. Previous administrations have refused to go to the table with North Korea, worrying that a meeting would produce little besides giving the country a PR boost. Ultimately, those fears ended up coming to fruition, with Trump's meetings delivering very little, if anything, of substance, with none of the US's key objectives being met. It seems that following Biden's election, even less progress is being made though, with Kim Jong-un apparently refusing to take Biden's phone calls. According to the White House, the administration has tried reaching out since February, but is yet to hear back from UN, and state media in the country is yet to even recognize Biden's election. A lack of communication could prove problematic though, with Biden's administration key to address the nuclear threat posed by the rogue state. Biden's been keen to emphasize the US's focus on the issue, with a full policy review on North Korea expected to be unveiled in April. Whether North Korea will even open the policy document or take any calls from the DC dialing code is yet to be seen. Staying in Asia, let's look at the continuing situation in Myanmar. As you likely know, at the beginning of February, a military coup took place in the country, displacing the democratically elected leadership. If you want to know more detail about the coup, then a video on the topic is linked below. Anyway, in response to the coup, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets in protests that have continued for the last 6 weeks. In fact, it seems that rather than cool down, protests have actually increased in recent weeks, with a group of politicians that were ousted during the coup vowing to lead a revolution against the military junta. The group's leader in his first speech since the coup showed some optimism, saying that this is the darkest moment of the nation and the moment that the dawn is close. With the protests continuing on the streets and around 20 protesters dying this weekend alone, many will be hopeful that this group will be able to lead a path forward for the country. The protesters aren't alone though, with the international community also stepping up its efforts against the military junta. It's been revealed that the Biden administration has agreed to grant protected status to Myanmar nationals living in the US. This decision would see around 1,600 people granted protected status for 18 months, a special status that would even allow undocumented immigrants the right to live and work in the US. As part of this action, several diplomats from Aung San Suu Kyi's deposed government were also granted special protection by the US, a clear sign that America's siding with the former government. It's not just the US either though, with other countries around the world stepping up pressure in moves that will only make life harder for the junta. Last Monday, a judge in Brazil annulled the corruption convictions of the country's former president, commonly known as Lula. Normally, this wouldn't be a big story, but the difference is who Lula is. Lula actually tried to run against the current president Bolsonaro back in 2018, and was, according to some polls, expected to beat him. The issue being that Brazil's top electoral court barred him from running due to Brazil's clean state law, which bars those convicted of serious crimes, corruption, or impeachment from being allowed to run for high political office. A law that was ironically introduced by Lula. What this new court decision means, though, is that Lula's effectively back in the race for Brazil's upcoming 2022 presidential election. And while Lula himself has played down speculation that he'll run again, a head-to-head presidential race between two grassroots popular candidates from two extremes of the political spectrum will certainly be interesting to watch. And you can bet that we'll be covering the election next year in all of its glory. Also, if you want to know more about this topic, then like the video and comment below, and we'll consider making a full video explaining what's happening in Brazil later this week. You can also sign up to our Patreon to vote for other video topics for the channel, with us currently running a poll allowing patrons to pick our next video. The link to the Patreon is in the description. At the end of last week, Amazon announced that they were removing books from their marketplace which frame sexual identity as mental illness. This decision led to the removal of a number of titles, including When Harry Became Sally by Ryan Anderson. This attracted a lot of attention, including from Republicans in Congress, who questioned the retailer's decision. Amazon responded bluntly, remarking that all retailers make decisions about what selection they choose to offer, going on to say that we offer customers across the political spectrum a wide variety of content that includes disparate opinions. We carefully consider the content we make available in our stores, and we review our approach regularly. We have chosen not to sell books that frame LGBTQ+ identity as mental illness. In our final story today, let's look to the UK for some good news. It was announced at the end of last week that a breeding program for the rare harlequin frog has been successful. This effort, led out of Manchester University, is one of a number trying to perfect the breeding conditions for this endangered amphibian. But this team seem to have made a breakthrough. With the breeding program now successful, many hope that these frogs can be bred and returned to the wild, saving the species from extinction. If you want more good news stories like this, then check out Good News, our weekly summary on Instagram. The account's linked below. So those were some of the biggest global news stories from the last week, and if 8 minutes wasn't enough for you, then there's links to further reading in the description. If you think we missed anything, then comment below the stories you'd like to see us cover next week. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and have rung the bell to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon.